3.5 years ago, I left the long-haul transportation, long-haul trucking industry. I was downsized after I had already started doing some investigating of how to leave. So ultimately the choice was taken away from me, but that gave me a perfect opportunity to do something that I really believed and that could be done better in transportation. So I started a delivery company using cargo bikes to do the first mile and last mile delivery in Hamilton. So cargo bikes and trailers, initially up to 300 pounds, now we do up to 500 pounds by bike. Our tagline is basically, we specialize in the convenient, efficient, emissions-free delivery of goods for and between local businesses using cargo bikes and trailers. So when I started the business, it was just going around word of mouth, trying to get people who, find my choir. And those are the initial customers, small businesses who believed in making things more sustainable, having a lower carbon footprint. So the main problem we tried to address was the first and last mile, because that is the least sustainable for various reasons: environmental, traffic, expense, safety issues with big vehicles on small roads. So our solution then is to try to use the correct size, the right size for the right job, right? So you wouldn't be moving a steel roll by bike. You would use a train or a truck for that. But for a lot of the commercial goods going into the city, bikes work very well. Very often, the street we started off on in Hamilton is a small commercial district with a nice little street wall. And I would sometimes see up to 5 big trucks vying for spots, and there were never parking spots for them, so they're blocking an entire lane trying to unload usually a pallet or less of goods. And that's where, again, for that kind of situation, those kinds of goods, which most of the urban goods are, bikes do very well. So I had started it as a sole proprietor, just a regular business registration, doing this thing on my own, trying to grow the business. But there were those values Peter mentioned that profit was only a means for me to sustain the business. I had no interest in getting wealthy off this. I just wanted to do good. I wanted to make things safer, more sustainable, benefit the environment, benefit the local economy, benefit the people, but I didn't know the right people. So I know some people mentioned already having a small business and transitioning it over. So after 2.5 years of doing it on my own, I transitioned it over to a co-op. People like Peter were very helpful as resources to research and find out how to do that. But we do mainly business-to-business deliveries, so we do sort of roughly split between newsprint distribution in the city, local newspapers, magazines, brochures, that sort of thing, that go to on a fixed route. So it's not door-to-door, it's bundles of papers going to various locations. And the other part is local food. So we work with local bakeries, local catering companies, local grocery stores. We have a grocery store called the Mustard Seed that started last year, a co-op as well we're very excited to be a partner with. So it's sort of roughly split between that, but after most of the slides you'll see as I talk are actually just pictures of what we do. And you'll see we do a lot of sort of big items as well. We've moved 3 households by bike. So we can do just about anything. We did last weekend. I did a 250-pound clawfoot tub. Yesterday evening, I delivered a fridge for someone. So we do all kinds of things. And so we've done a lot of experimentation with different things, starting off very small and then, growing bigger. But in terms of making it relevant, see, there's some of the larger items. So I'll just let you see the various images as I talk. But I wanted to find a way to embed the values in the organization, to bring democracy into the work, into the company, and to make sure that the values I believed in, the benefit I wanted to make happen for the community and for the environment, would be in the structure of the business itself. And co-ops aren't the only way to do that. There's something called B Corp, which is a certification that you can get as a traditional corporation that will embed certain values into your corporation in terms of people, planet, profit. But it doesn't bring democracy into the workplace. That's the key difference there. So even though you now, as a B Corp member, you have certain things to live up to in terms of, what percentage, goes towards the environment, and certain metrics that you need to ensure happen. It's not about that shared ownership where people come together with similar values and have equal say in the matter. So in a B Corp, you can still have people, that idea of someone who buys a lot more shares and therefore has a bigger voice, right? We wanted to make sure that we had every member coming together with an equal voice.
Abram?
Yep.
How did you find your first members? When you made that decision to move from sole proprietorship to co-op, how did you find those people that also wanted to join on a cargo bike co-op?
Yeah, that was interesting. Initially, the reason I didn't start off as a co-op was because I didn't know the right people. I had an idea, I had an opportunity, and I went with it. But it was just through the networks of doing the work and meeting people. One of our members teaches at McMaster and has a teaching farm as well. So he had this big interest in local food and in sustainability and finding a way to combine the in-between, and that is the transportation aspect, right? So people from different sort of walks of life in Hamilton who had heard about what I did and wanted to be supportive when they found out that I was looking at creating a cooperative, they jumped on board. So we had, just over a year ago, we came together and 7 members formed the cooperative. So we jumped from a sole proprietor to 7 members. Yes?
And are all of your members cyclist delivery people, or what's the distribution
No.
of responsibilities?
No. That is one of the things that can be both a strength and a weakness. Whenever you bring democracy in, democracy is messy, right? Because you have a lot of people, a lot of conversations that need to happen, a lot of skill sets that come together. Now, in our case, it wasn't. There were certain things that I did not enjoy, was not good at. The sort of financial accounting, that kind of stuff. I just wanted to be out there and make the difference on the ground. But I knew I needed some people who had those other skills. So our treasurer is an accountant by trade. So he came on board to take over that aspect of the business. Another member with various financial certifications, but an interest in ethical investments, in trying to align investments with individual people's values. So he, again, came on board to help develop the business. So 4 of the 7 members are riders as well. Others are on the board and they participate in various board roles and in committees to drive the business forward.
So a worker, so going back to what Peter said, so 75%, you can have 25% that are not members, but can you also have members who are not workers? Like who don't, like what defines a worker? If you say a board member doesn't get paid probably.
Mm-hmm.
So what defines a worker? You may not be fine. I'm sure.
Yeah, worker.
It's in your bylaws.
Yeah.
You define it in your bylaws.
Oh, so you can say external.
You could pay somebody $1 a year.
Well, what we do with board work, any of the delivery work is paid hourly. Other work, board work is paid in shares. So everyone gets compensated for the work they do, but it's not the same work in terms of, everyone's going to be out on the road on delivery. Yes?
Sorry, earlier you mentioned something called B Corp. Is that a law or is that a group of people?
B Corp?
What is that?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, sure.
B Corp is a third-party certification that corporations can apply for and be certified for that say that they adhere to a certain set of values around governance, sustainability. So you can check out B Corp Canada.
Sorry,
Yeah.
is it BCORP?
B Corp. Yeah, yeah, it's short form for Benefit Corporation.
Thank you very
So
much.
it's not an official legal structure. It's a third-party certification.
I guess so, in a way.
Yeah.
But you don't get inspected.
Yeah, nonprofits are not eligible. There are some people playing around with how that can be changed or a similar certification. And CSI is also working with B Corp on a holiday gift guide to showcase businesses that share our values. So CSI members with products and services, co-ops, as well as B Corps. So just as a heads up, because that goes back to an earlier question around, is there any place where you can go to find out about all of these amazing people? We're working on that as well. Yeah. Sorry, back to questions though. Dave, we'll go to you and then to the back. Yeah.
Just a comment about the B Corp. I think there is a law that was passed in the United States giving basically legal protection for those corporations against lawsuits from shareholders. So if a corporation is a B Corp, officially certified, then they can pursue social objectives without fear from lawsuits from shareholders. Because if they pursue some non-profit maximizing objectives, then they can be sued. But B Corp allows them to avoid that threat.
Yeah, it's not in Canada though, it's
Not in Canada,
Not in
yes.
Canada.
Not in Canada.
It is legal in
Yeah.
the US, yeah.
Yeah, and people are experimenting globally or with different legal structures that play in between, nonprofits and for-profits, co-ops. So there's a spectrum of legal structures that people are starting to experiment with, and then other policy and regulation. Ontario Nonprofit Network that you heard about before, which actually operates right next door, is a great place to follow for a lot of this. They're on top of a lot of the legal structures. Back to the back and then to over here.
So I'm interested, like, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you put all this energy and effort and investment and time to create something, and then you're in this position of sort of handing it over to a larger group of people who now have, it's more democratic, but conceivably you could even be voted off your own management board. The ability to guide decisions, and certainly, like you said, the messiness of the democracy, balancing, trying to build consensus on every decision is a real shift from the experience of a single entrepreneur. So how has that transition been sort of beneficial? Were these, I'm conflating all the questions, but the members were also investors that allowed you to grow the business, and how has the delegation of power and your added to the bureaucracy of guiding a small business?
I'll answer the second part first. We did set up a member share that every new member would have to purchase, so $1,000 to gain entry into the co-op as a member. And we had so that helped us helped the co-op in terms of having a bit more money. In terms of my own investment up to the point where I was now one of 7 rather than the sole owner, the co-op did buy my business from me. So, but they did it. The co-op did that in shares. So I have more shares than some of the other members because of the prior work I put in. So Peter mentioned that before as well, where you can have different members can have different levels of shares, but they don't have a stronger or weaker voice depending on how many shares they own. I personally welcomed having more people to share the enterprise with and combine skill sets, and not being the only person at the helm. But it definitely is a messy business, and we're still working through some of those issues. There is still, people sometimes talk about founder syndrome, and that can work both ways, where the founder feels more attachment to the business and wants to hold on. And also the other side, which I feel we are dealing with a fair bit, is where a lot of decisions are still deferred to me as founder because, well, you've done it so much longer, you know the business better, right? So these are all issues to work through.
But I'm going to ask about, you said your board gets paid in shares as opposed to in dividends, basically. Which is an interesting, for me, shares always sounds like shareholders. It's an interesting sort of language for the co-op model for me. But how does that work? Like, if you decide to become a board member for you, how do you assign shares if it's not a buy-in?
Sorry, I'm not quite...
Well, I'm sorry. The woman at the front sort of asked you whether or not.
Yeah. No, but Peter actually said that, not Abram. Peter said that is a possibility, but not Abram. Yeah.
I know, but he actually said his board member, board members paid in shares, not in profits from that come from the company.
Oh, well, all of the members who have paid in, who have bought a membership, do get dividends.
Right.
Once we attain profitability, then dividends in the bylaws are specified. So certain percentage. Bylaws, by the way, are very important. It's fairly involved stuff, but it's good to pay attention to writing down. All coming together and deciding what is really important to you. Where do you want things to go and be allocated? I mean, one thing we did is we decided that paying a living wage was very important to us, and that equal pay for depending, regardless of what work. So the accountant doesn't get more than the writer in terms of an hourly rate. So we wanted to really have that democratic thing in place and the equality. But a lot of these things are set out in the bylaws.
Can I try to understand your model, and you correct me if I'm
Sure.
wrong? And I'm just going to assume that you have 10 members, just to make my math easier too. So 10 members, all with one vote, right? In the say of like strategy, bylaws, decision making for that co-op. But in the shares, and let's say there's 100 shares to be divvied up between the 10 people, because you were the founder, the co-op decided to give you, and I'll just make up a number, like 40 shares, leaving 60 for the other 9 members that they then divided up somehow. Maybe the accountant gets 20 for some reason because he's smart with numbers, so he managed that somehow, right? And the lawyer might get some, whatever, who knows? But the rest of those 60 shares get divvied up between the other 9, and then when you turn a profit of $100,000 because you're moving how many households of goods each day, then you would see 40% of that, the next person 20%, 10, 10, 10, and 10. Is that correct? Roughly?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there are different classes of shares,
Okay.
and so we have different percentages allocated for different types of shares.
Beautiful.
We also have another category called sweat equity, right?
Okay.
So if people didn't have the $1,000 up front to join, they could work that off, right?
And that's when the board, this speaks back to the board member who may not have put $1,000 in,
Yes.
but in return for board work is getting some percentage of those.
Yes.
So you actually set aside shares for future, okay. In the same way a conventional shareholders agreement might.
Sorry, set aside shares for future
Employee,
work
future,
to be done.
yeah, sweat equity, whatever. You have to, or otherwise you're going to dilute it. So either they were set aside or someone gets diluted.
The member share is, there's accounting stuff that has to happen in the background in terms of the $1,000 member share needs to be paid, but we can stipulate a time frame, right, and different ways of paying it.